tonight. People are populating our Zoom tonight. Welcome to the second installment of our Advancing Black Futures, a Black History series, where we are looking at the intersection of radical Black faith and the project of democracy, defending and expanding democracy, particularly as it relates to the work of desegregation and opportunity expansion and power sharing. So welcome again to this experience. I have been calling this a cyber brush harbor, a digital brush harbor, an opportunity for us to reenact the courage and the tactics, maybe even strategy of those of us who are descendants of chattel slaves, how our ancestors were able to find clearings in the woods outside of the gaze of white supremacy, the gaze of whiteness itself, outside of the line of sight of the master class, the planter class, and to strategize in spiritual and ethical ways, their survival and their future. And so that is how I understand the work that we do here tonight. This is the work of stealing away into the brush harbor as we prepare for the revolution of nonviolent love that can upend and topple segregation the same way we saw it happen before. We have seen the power of the faith imagination, the power of Black faith folk showing up in impossible situations and asserting their humanity through love in ways that have toppled the impossible. We understand that there is no empire that can outlive the power of love, the power of righteousness. We still believe, as hard as it is to believe, that the arc of the moral universe does bend toward justice. And that is why we can courageously, that is why we can boldly gather in these virtual spaces to tell our story afresh and to draw from the deep wells of resistance and the deep wells of radical love as ways for us to forecast our way forward. So I think we've given enough of us a chance to enter into the cyber sanctuary. I'm excited tonight to introduce to the Mount Zion family and to the South Jersey family, our entire network of Mount Zion and Building One America, the Reverend Dr. C. Vernon Mason. Dr. Mason is a colleague, a mentor of mine, and I am delighted that he is a part of my trajectory and a voice of wisdom and also a voice of agitation in my life as I lean into my own prophetic call, as I lean into my own mandate of being one who serves as a piece of the conscience of this nation that is rooted in racial capitalism. And so Dr. Mason is with us. He is a trained legal mind, a graduate of Columbia Law School. He is a business mind as well. And many of us will appreciate this. If you know anything about me, you know I love that school in Atlanta, Georgia, on those red clay hills where men are begotten. Morehouse College, the alma mater of Martin Luther King Jr., the alma mater of people like Julian Bond, the alma mater of a man by the name of Howard Thurman that Mount Zion hears me quote and dissect on a regular basis. Dr. Mason is a graduate of Morehouse College. You're a 1969 graduate of Morehouse?
67.
1967, I'm sorry, 1967 graduate of Morehouse. He was a part of the class, the last class of our venerable former president, the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, who was a mentor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, we don't talk about this enough, but Dr. King went around the country making popular the sayings and the phrases of Dr. base. So much of what we love about Dr. King's elocution and oratory, we can accredit to the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. And so Dr. Mason is with us today. He is an activist. He is a great legal force. He has brought down many structures, legal structures of subjugation and injustice in the state of New York, particularly, but more broadly than that, he currently serves as the director of the Doctor of Ministry program and visiting professor of urban ministry and African American history and religion at New York Theological Seminary, where I also serve on the faculty. That is how I became acquainted personally with Dr. Mason. I've known of his legend from my own time as an associate pastor in Harlem, and to be able to not just meet him, but to be able to work alongside him, to co-teach a class with him. He and I are co-facilitators of a course at New York Theological Seminary entitled Black Lives Matter. It's a course that he actually founded at New York Theological Seminary, and I'm just grateful to be his thought partner in how that class is now evolving and how it is morphing. And so Mount Zion, Building One America, South Jersey, I present to you the Reverend Dr. C. Vernon Mason, who is going to be an absolute treat for us tonight, the same way we were able to glean wisdom from the Reverend Dr. Virgil Wood on last week. By way of prayer, I want to start with the words of Howard Thurman, that Morehouse man that we just named. I think he's a 1923 graduate of Morehouse College. Howard Thurman wrote a book entitled Jesus and the Disinherited. Mm-hmm. And in this book, Jesus and the Disinherited, he does some deep theological work on the nature of segregation. I want to lift just a portion of that today. But this book, Jesus and the Disinherited, we've taught this at Mount Zion, particularly in my first years as the pastor there. But this book is so important to movement building because Jesus and the Disinherited was the single book that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. traveled with everywhere he journeyed. There was not a place where Dr. King went that he did not carry this book by Howard Thurman with him. So this is one of the manifestos of the movement. It has been so foundational for my own development as a public intellectual, as a public theologian, as a pastor. And so I want to lift these words from Howard Thurman, Jesus and the Disinherited. And as soon as I finish reading these words, I'm going to say amen. And then we're going to hear some opening remarks from Dr. Mason, and then we'll hop into our conversation and our flow for the evening. Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. It is important to analyze the functioning of segregation that we may better understand the nature of the fear it engenders. It is obvious that segregation can be established only between two groups that are unequal in power and control. Two groups that are relatively equal in power in a society may enter into a voluntary arrangement of separateness. Segregation can apply only to a relationship involving the weak and the strong. For it means that limitations are arbitrarily set up, which in the course of time tend to become fixed and to seem normal in governing the etiquette between two groups. A peculiar characteristic of segregation is the ability of the stronger to shuttle back and forth between the prescribed areas with complete immunity and a kind of mutually tacit sanction, while the position of the weaker, on the other hand, is quite definitely fixed and frozen. Given segregation as a factor determining relations, the resources of the environment are made into instruments to enforce the artificial position. Most of the accepted social behavior patterns assume segregation to be normal. If normal, then correct. If correct, then moral. If moral, then religious. Religion is thus made a defender and a guarantor of the presumptions. God, for all practical purposes, is imagined as an elderly, benign white man seated on a white throne with bright white light emanating from his countenance. Angels are blondes and brunettes suspended in the air around his throne to be his messengers and execute his purposes. Satan is viewed as being red with the glow of fire, but the imps, the messengers of the devil, are black. The phrase black as an imp is a stereotype. The implications of such a view are simply fantastic in the intensity of their tragedy. Doomed on earth to a fixed and unremitting status of inferiority of which segregation is symbolic, and at the same time cut off from the hope that the Creator intended it otherwise, those who are thus victimized are stripped of all their social protections. The fear that segregation inspires among the weak in turn breeds fear among the strong and the dominant. Ashe and amen. Dr. Mason, these were the words of our elder brother, our elder Morehouse brother, now ancestor, Howard Thurman. What say ye as an opening comment?
God bless you, Dr. Willie Dwayne Francois III, your son, Mount Zion, those of you who are witnessing this. I am filled just thinking about this topic that we are going to discuss tonight. If I may, and these are sacred memories for me, my deceased mother, Aline Pierce Mason, was a teacher. She taught at a small school in a small town, Marion, Arkansas. Marion, 11 miles from Memphis, Tennessee. She took me to school, and this is how the story went, Dr. Francois. When I was 3 years old, because she didn't want to leave me with a babysitter. And so my first teacher at Marion was Mrs. Mozella Mars. And I want to say a word for the teachers at Marion, all of elementary school, the teachers at Henry C. Yerger High School in Hope, Arkansas, where I was from 7th through 10th grade, and the teachers at Helena, Arkansas, before I went to Morehouse on an early admission scholarship out of 11th grade. I want to say this about those Black teachers. Each one of those schools, Doc, were under-resourced in terms of allocation because of segregation. But those teachers were excellent. Those teachers took resources from their meager salaries to supplement material for each one of us. And they instilled in us, we may not have gotten where we should have gotten in this society, but we're going to prepare each one of you. And for that, I am eternally grateful. They were magnificent, all of them. Those of you who follow this may remember that one of the big cases after Brown versus the Board of Education was decided in 1954, which basically struck down apartheid in America. America, 246 years of our ancestors' captivity to 1865, then the brief period of Reconstruction, and we are seeing something similar to that now. Once this decision was made in Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, Supreme Court decided separate but equal, which basically was segregation and apartheid. That existed around this country until 1954. And it's important to just point this out. The author of the brief, the two co-authors of the brief that dismantled apartheid in America was a Black woman, lawyer, Constance Baker Motley, and Thurgood Marshall. And then afterwards, the big case that tested whether or not this was going to be enforced was in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957 at Central High School, when Dwight Eisenhower had to deploy federal troops. And this was a violent encounter that those 9 young Black students faced. Ernie Green, who was one of the lead students, the first to graduate, a good friend. And I wanted to just track that and then to say this, and then I'll turn it back over to you. What you read from Howard Thurman is as relevant today with the fights that you all are waging in New Jersey as it was when Thurman wrote it decades ago. There is this economic dimension of segregation that we need to be critically aware of. Because part of the narrative that we sort of got derailed about is whether or not these efforts were so Black students could be around white students. Numbers of what was happening across this land was people understood the negative part of being under-resourced. And so part of this, a large aspects of it had to do with making certain that our students were receiving all of the benefits that they should have been receiving from public education. And wanted to say that. But Dr. Francois, let me say this about you also to Mount Zion and to New Jersey and to everyone who's on this, at this wonderful occasion. Mount Zion, you have one of the finest pastors in this land. He is a committed pastor. He is a phenomenal professor and teacher at New York Theological Seminary. He also is director of our Master Professional Studies program at Sing Sing Prison, and that's the only program of that nature around the land where our brothers who are incarcerated are receiving education. And lastly, in terms of this aspect of the program, do not for one moment be discouraged about the fight that you are waging valiantly in New Jersey. Part of what you are doing in New Jersey is educating our people about what you're fighting about, because part of what Phil Murphy is relying on is a confusion about what the issues are. So be careful about who you rely on to tell you the truth. There is something that you can depend on. When Dr. Francois is preaching and teaching and telling you what's going on with this movement, you can rely on that, because his interests and your interests are in perfect alignment. And so I'm just delighted to be here, Doc, and we can spend as much time as the program allows.
Thank you, Dr. Mason, for those humbling and uber gracious remarks about me and my leadership. I don't take for granted that you said it, and I believe you mean it too. But thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for blowing some oxygen into this grassroots movement. Particularly the way that you were able to articulate some of the gaps in courage of our current governor, who comports himself as a civil rights governor. He was a national board member of the NAACP, and you were a part of a stronger NAACP. There was a time when the NAACP had the most amount of teeth and chops of any organization in the world, particularly when you think about the relationship prior to the severance of the Legal Defense Fund from the NAACP. We know that when that severance happened, some of the teeth, particularly the way litigation was brought forth and resolved, shifted after that split. But you were an employee of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. This is the organization that became home to Thurgood Marshall, the organization that literally argued before the Supreme Court segregation to its death.
Correct. Yes. Talk
to us about the importance of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in that desegregationist moment, and then talk to us about your own experiences and the type of work that you did as a member of that monumental team.
Thank you, Doc. This is just some rich history. Howard University, one of the HBCUs that's been under bomb threats in recent weeks, one of the 20 plus historically Black colleges and universities. Howard University decades ago had a brilliant lawyer by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston. Charles Hamilton Houston not only came to Howard to get it accredited, he was a graduate of Harvard, but he also wanted to train and mentor a group and a cadre of young lawyers who would challenge and dismantle the system of segregation in this country. And one of his students was Thurgood Marshall.
Now, Doc, I'm sorry to break your train of thought there, but Charles Hamilton Houston was brought to Howard by Mordecai Wyatt Johnson.
Yes.
Who was a Morehouse man, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so Morehouse is all in this. Okay, I just want to make sure that Morehouse got its credit.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Mordecai Johnson. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And his mantra was that either a Black lawyer was a social engineer or they were a parasite on society. That's the training that Thurgood Marshall received and background for him coming to NAACP Legal Defense Fund, because they worked together, Attorney Houston and Attorney Marshall. Thurgood Marshall, the first director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and that is the name, the Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And so he set out with a series of cases, some test cases, and to build up, this took several years, to build up ultimately to challenging the very foundation of what had become a legal system in this country for almost 60 years, from 1896 to 1954. And as I said, Constance Baker Motley, who became a federal judge, Constance Baker Motley, was the main writer and author of the brief that dismantled that. It was a unanimous decision, 9-0, that basically decided that segregation in terms of public education was unconstitutional. My experience at NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, I worked there for a year. Some of the most brilliant lawyers in the world. And so it was just being around them and being able to be in their presence and learn from them. Drew Days was there at that time. He became head of the Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department. Lynn Jones became Lynn Walker. Just a number of people who were doing phenomenal work. One of the first cases I argued was down in Selma, Alabama, with Attorney Chestnut and Hank and Mary Sanders in Selma. When I was a legal defense fund, working on capital punishment cases and education, employment discrimination cases, and afterwards, very quickly, I left after a year. Was in private practice with a firm and a couple of other stints. And then I went out on my own in the first part of 1980s. And I'll just highlight a few system things that I think would be good for this discussion that we're having tonight in terms of movement and being part of a movement, being leaders in a movement, and actually looking at how do you go about successfully dealing with systemic racism. And one of it's not a takeaway because it's really part of who I am and who my family is and my wife is. I've been, and the family has been privileged, Doc, to be a member and officer and now deacon at my home church, Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, pastored by another Morehouse man, Reverend Dr. Kevin Osbus III. This actually, he came there as a student. This is his 50th year there at Abyssinian. And I mentioned this, because I was a trustee, I'm a deacon now. I mentioned this because it is absolutely critical that in a movement, that movement has a faith foundation and center. Is absolutely critical. And I always practice law this way, 23 years in law, 23 years in ministry. I always looked at how you could work hand in glove in community, in cases that I had, because numbers of things that we did without the support, and I'm not talking about verbal, I'm talking about people on the streets, I'm talking about people, grassroots, I'm talking about marches, I'm talking about demonstrations, I'm talking about pressure. Numbers of things that we were able to accomplish, and I'll give you 2 or 3 highlights, was a result of working both court and community. Court and community. One without the other, it was not working. We had, for literally decades, and it preceded me, but I started practicing in 72. We saw, and I'll highlight these things. We had one police misconduct case after another for several years, from 1972 to 1983, when a police officer had been charged with killing a person of color, and in my practice, predominantly Black folks who I represented. There would be grand jury presentations and no indictment. Time after time that happened. So in 1983, with the support of a massive support from the community, marches, demonstrations, all of that, a group of clergy, lawyers, Attorney Alton Maddox, a number of people who were involved with this, Dr. Butts spearheaded it. Clergy, lawyers, and community, we call for congressional hearings on police brutality here in New York City. It had never been done before. And Dr. Francois, the political establishment, went berserk. I mean, they accused us of everything under the sun, because we were, with the support of the community, shining a light on something, and this is New York City, that they did not want the light shone on. And Congressman John Conyers from Michigan, as a matter of fact, the head of the Judiciary Committee who chaired this was Peter Rodino from New Jersey. And those hearings were held in New York City. And out of that process, we secured, because of the whole process, one, community, church, clergy, lawyers, everybody working together. The first Black police commissioner in New York City, Benjamin Ward, in 1985. Another instance, and this was a year before we represented Tawana Brawley, but this is 1986. There was a young man, Michael Griffin. He and his father and others, they were out in Queens, a section of Queens called Howard Beach. And they were attacked by a mob of young people, and they chased Michael to his death. And in that case, we decided, Turner Automatics and I, that we were not going to go through this normal process of a presentation to grand jury, no indictment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We demanded, and again, because thousands of people took to the streets and protested that death movement. Because of that, we demanded a special prosecutor. And in 1986, it was the first instance of a special prosecutor being appointed in a racially motivated violent case in New York State. And that special prosecutor's name was Charles Hines, who subsequently became district attorney of Kings County, Brooklyn. I point this out not so much to point out to what I did and what we did, but to just say the normal kind of things, because we were discouraged at every point, the normal kind of approaches that are taken to deal with injustice do not work. I've learned that. What does work is there is enormous power in people, in us, in our community. And if you can galvanize community around the issues that you're trying to prevail on, that is what does work. And so I just wanted to offer those things. Again, don't be discouraged. Part of what is absolutely essential is share information with the people. Do your leadership with integrity. The part of what I always subscribe to, even because it was sort of a natural thing for me to go from law to teaching, because part of what I always tried to do during those 23 years in law, Dr. Francois, was to teach, to help to educate, not because I knew everything, but because I knew how important it was for our community to have information that they needed to rely on to make decisions in their lives. Yeah.
Now, Dr. Mason, you made a gesture toward the Tawana Brawley case. And I think that is important. One, is important because this was a minor who came forward after being missing for 4 days, and the system sought drastically, and deceitfully to discredit this minor during the process. Obviously, nobody knows exactly what happened. But when you were representing her, as a result of representing her, it gave the system an opportunity to discredit her and also attempt to discredit you, which is to say that all of this work you did with Dr. Butts, all of this work you did with the Legal Defense Fund, all this work you did with Attorney Maddox to challenge the very legal core, the legal system of New York State, New York City particularly, does not come without consequences. In a sense, you were disbarred in New York because of this. I'm interested in you talking to us about the kind of courage and the kind of risk that we must be willing to take when we stand up against imperial evil, when we stand up against carceral forces, when we stand up against white supremacy. Maybe maybe make a few gestures towards what happened to you, but also helping us understand that this work does not come without some backlash. It does not come without systemic attacks on those who dare to speak truth.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and let me say two things, and I'm gonna fill in a lot of gaps here, but let me share this with the audience and with you. And then I'm gonna fill in a lot of gaps in terms of the question that you asked me. Stay tuned, because the Tawana Brawley case is not over. That's all I can say on that for right now. But let me say this. And I'm glad you asked me that, because I probably would not have answered this part of it. I mentioned the attacks on the historically Black colleges, universities, anybody who's involved in movement work, Black Lives Matter, et cetera. Expect to be attacked personally, professionally, otherwise. The system, and I think this was the first part of it, Dr. Francois, when we brought the congressional hearings here in 1983, that did not make me a friend of the system. And then in 1985, the community drafted me to run for Manhattan District Attorney. That really did not make me friends with a racist system. And the person who I was running against was an icon, Robert Morgenthau. The disciplinary committee, Dr. Francois, that took my license January 26, 1995, they began investigating me in 1986. They investigated me, I think, longer than they've ever investigated anybody in their history. They investigated me for 9 years. 86, 87, 88. And part of the message, and let me be clear on this, because I'm very comfortable with discussing this. Part of the message was, in each one of those years, you need to stop doing what you're doing. And I didn't. I didn't stop in 83. I didn't stop in 85. I didn't stop in 86. And how dare you represent this child? That's 87. I continued, but they investigated me for 9 years. But this is how God worked. They not only took my license January 26, 1995, it was public. And the public message was not only to me, but to any lawyer who would dare do this kind of stuff. This is what's going to happen to you. Dr. Francois, they even sent a word up to my church, Abyssinian, y'all need to put him out. Okay. But this is how God worked. no job, no license, can't practice. God's answer to me was, I got some work for you to do, my brother, that they can't take from you. I got work for you to do. I'm going to open a door for you that they can't close. So I went from this devastating blow, and this is when it got a little funny, Dr. Francois, because, at that point I got out of Morehouse, I got out of law school, I had gone to graduate business school. This is when it got a little funny. The Lord said, but you got to go back to school. That's when I entered and answered my call to ministry and went to New York Theological Seminary the fall of 1995. And my introduction, look how poignant this was. My introduction to the seminary was that summer when New York Theological Seminary and Ford Foundation was doing this big conference on domestic violence. And the keynote speaker was the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright. I knew I was in the right place. I knew I was answering my call. And I knew, and my wife and my family knew at that point that everything was going to be all right. And so I have been in ministry now for 23 years, the same number of years that I practiced law. And for those who are interested in this kind of numerology, that's 46, right? I was born in 1946. Now, I just throw that out there, right? But it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. And but no, do expect when you're challenging systems, do expect consequences. You protect yourself as best you can. You protect your family as best you can. But part of what the system can do, and you got to interpret this, is to make you afraid and to make you fearful that you cannot challenge us and you cannot challenge this system. And part of what I think God's answer is to this is, I will show you not only that you can challenge this system, and I'm calling you to challenge this system, but I will protect you. Okay. So, but I'm glad you asked that. I don't, and I didn't say that in terms of what was done to Tawana Brawley as a throwaway. I was serious about that. Stay tuned.
That's good. That's good. That's good. Doc, we're bumping up against the hour. There are a couple of more things I want to ask you, particularly in this current climate. You and I were teaching Black Lives Matter.
Don't forget about the black woman judge, Supreme Court judge.
I'm getting there now. Okay. You and I were. I'm leading in that direction now. I may not. All right. You can answer whatever you want to answer. I'm going to ask a particular question. You can go where you want to go. Okay. You and I were teaching Black Lives Matter one Tuesday night, and it was the day after Donald John Trump announced that he was going to nominate Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Got it. And I remember us having a conversation about how this judicial icon of the left was being replaced by someone who was really the antithesis of everything she lived and litigated about, right? And I remember you saying that what Amy Coney Barrett is going to do with the seat of Ruth Bader Ginsburg is only comparable to what happened to the seat that was occupied by Thurgood Marshall.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And this is important because many of us should know this, that currently in our state Supreme Court, there's a case that will be heard about school segregation. Land versus State of New Jersey, Latino Action Network versus State of New Jersey. Case is about 4 years old now. It is in our state Supreme Court. What struck down school segregation or segregation in the United States was actually not a bill in Congress, but it was a ruling by the Supreme Court of the United States, right? So we have this case in the state Supreme Court that we are hoping will show that we're on the right footing, that we're on the right track, and that hopefully our litigators, hopefully our legislators will understand that they need to act independent of what happens in the courts. I do hope our legislators in this state understand that we can't allow the courts to determine this issue, but people that we sent to Trenton to legislate need to legislate, right? Got that. But what changed? But Brown v. Board was the court's undoing of Plessy versus Ferguson, right? The courts are really important for the type of work we do. I think as the left, we have not learned how to work that court the way the right seemingly has, right? Say a word about what Clarence Thomas meant in that particular moment to the legacy of a Thurgood Marshall. And then if you feel it, talk about this current vacancy that we have now, where we are promised to get the first Black woman nominated and we know approved and we hope approved. We never know we'll never take for granted what can happen in this Congress, in this Senate particularly. I said a lot there, but go for it.
Clarence Thomas, as you said, is the antithesis of Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall brought perspective, experience, civil rights experience, dignity. He brought for the first time in the court's history, the first Black who was appointed, but he brought something to that court for the several years that he served that had never been present in that court prior to his appointment, and just a monumental legacy. Clarence Thomas, and I believe Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas should never have been on the court. Clarence Thomas just recently gave almost a death blow to voting rights in Alabama with that decision that just came down this week. Clarence Thomas is the most white racist person on the court, if you understand what I'm saying. I think that he has betrayed not only the legacy of Thurgood Marshall, but he has forfeited his right to be considered a Black man in America. That's what I have to say about him. Now, having said that, I believe that when this Black judge, woman judge, justice, is appointed to the Supreme Court, it's going to be one of the most dynamic changes that court has ever seen. I have absolute confidence, almost to the person, of those persons who Biden is going to be selecting from, I got absolute confidence that, with Sonia Sotomayor, with Kagan, when this Black woman arrives, and I like to be a fly on the wall, Dr. Francois, not watching the bench, but when they discussing this stuff, not that you don't see, I would love to be in the robing room, in the discussion room, when sister comes in there, and my Clarence Thomas is in that room. See, because look at what's been happening in terms of the dynamic. For all of these years that he's been betraying our trust and the legacy of Thurgood Marshall, he's been the only one. He's been the only Black person in there. When the power of the sisterhood comes in there, and he has to have a conversation that he has not been having, he gonna run home to his wife. Oh Lord, baby, you know what happened today? Oh Lord, because, and I'm serious about this. You know this, I know this, we know this as a community, that the stuff he's been getting away with up there with these conversations that don't make sense, this Black woman justice is gonna put that in check. So those discussions that they're going to be having, even when they get ready to make decisions, are going to be very different. I'm looking forward to this. When you look at that array, and it's a phenomenal array, you have absolutely just phenomenal Black women judges all over this country. As a matter of fact, the more I think about it, other than doing what he's been doing now, when you think about his credentials to be a Supreme Court judge, and you compare his credentials and his background to Thurgood Marshall, there's no comparison. There's no comparison. Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Mason, we're at the hour, but I do want to.
Oh man, this has been wonderful.
I know. This is, people. This is just another evening of you and I on the phone, man.
Listen. I want to invite every one of you all to take our class, Black Lives Matter. If you think that and I know you know this, that Dr. Francois, in addition to being a wonderful father, a wonderful pastor, just a great human being, he is a phenomenal teacher. And I have not had this much fun teaching since I've been here. I told him that I started this course, actually started this course the year the head of the transatlantic criminal enterprise, Donald Trump, won the presidency. We started in 2016, right? But I have not had this much fun teaching this class since your pastor joined us. So all of you are invited to come to this class. Please come. We have a great time. We'll be teaching it again next fall. But it's just been wonderful. Yes.
Dr. Mason, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for evoking the faith legacy of the Abyssinian Church, which we know is a legacy that Dr. Butts has managed and has expanded well, but we know that it's the legacy of the Abyssinian Church that goes back to Daddy Powell,
Adam Jr.,
Adam Senior, Adam Senior, Adam Jr., to Proctor.
Yes.
So you represent a very strong faith legacy, one that has literally changed the nation. Your church, your one of the pastors of that church, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., wrote more civil rights legislation than anybody that's ever lived. LBJ is a phenomenal president, but everything he signed that made this country better was actually written by the pen of Adam Clayton Powell in some way or another. So the Abyssinian Church is just so important for the moral development of America, for the protection and expansion of this democracy, for the proliferation of Black freedom and Black equity. So thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for representing all that you represent and doing it. And so
if I can interject this real quickly.
Sure.
Samuel DeWitt Proctor, Reverend Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor, who lived in Jersey when he was pastor here, he personally was the advisor for over 300 African Americans who got their doctorates. Wow. He also was one of the 3 or so mentors to Martin Luther King Jr. And he was a fraternity brother, Kappa Alpha Psi. But Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor, that legacy, Adam Clayton Powell Sr., Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Samuel DeWitt Proctor, and Dr. Butts has just been a tremendous legacy that I feel very, very good about. And just for your members to know, Mount Zion, for the last 20 years, I've been teaching the new members class at Abyssinian Baptist Church. So that's part of my duties, not only as a minister, but as a deacon. And for all of you deacons at Mount Zion, I've been serving on the deacon board at Abyssinian since I trained, walked 90 to 92. And so, yeah, this doc is my 30th year, wow, as a deacon at Abyssinian Baptist Church. Praise God.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I know that we have Brother Nathan Parker, who is with us, one of our political leaders in our area. We also, there's some comments here. One of the rising stars in our area, Jelani Gandy, is with us today, and celebrating you in the chat. My cousin Stacey Hawkins from Houston is celebrating you in the chat. And Diane Campbell.
Okay, your cousin is in Houston, Texas?
In Houston, watching. Okay,
my sister-in-law is down there, Nita Demerson.
Really?
Yeah, Nita Demerson.
Because your wife is from Galveston.
Yeah, she born in Galveston, grew up in Lamarck, Texas. And let me do a shout out to my wife. For all of you to know, my wife saved me. All right, I was down at Morehouse, just hey, please, and met her Morehouse Gymnasium, September of 1965. And as of May of this year, we would have been married 55 years. Thelma Rollins was her maiden name. And we have 3 children, 1 grandbaby. But listen, I can't say enough about Thelma.
Got it. Councilwoman Blackwell is with us as well. Excited that we have some power in the room as well. Doc, I do want to say this. Now, I knew your wife was from Galveston. I didn't know the Lamarck connection. I'm a graduate of Lamarck High School. So not only am I from Galveston, we also have that Lamarck connection as well.
She went to, matter of fact, she was drum major there. She went to Lincoln, right? Okay, because it was Lincoln before you went to Lamarck High. So you came, you came later. You came later, Francois. Thelma graduated from Lincoln. Thelma graduated, 1960, what was it? 63. She graduated Lincoln 1963. She was drum major there, you know. I think it was just I've even seen some of the pictures, you know what I'm saying? But no, but great school, man. Great school. I mean, yeah. So but that's right. You went to Lamarck High School. Well, that's about as close as it can get. Okay.
Okay. I know it. Okay. I know it. Your sister-in-law is on, right?
My sister-in-law, Anita Demerson, she's in Houston.
She's with us tonight. I think you know that.
Okay.
Yep, she just gave us a shout as well. So your sister.
Oh my God, Anita, you. Now that's too heavy. Because my son is down in Houston too. Anita was part of all this. Okay.
Miss Anita, I graduated from Lamarck High School in 2005. Okay. Third in my class. I missed salutatorian by a hair. Would have been the first male salutatorian, first Black salutatorian in the history of the school, but I missed it. Graduated number 3 in my class.
I got to say this. About Willie Dwayne Francois III. Listen to this. I have never seen a reference like this. Listen to this. He had, when he applied for his job here at New York Theological Seminary, he had a professor who taught for years at Harvard. Okay. All right, y'all got this. This professor wrote a reference letter for this brother and said of all of the people that he taught over his decades of teaching at Harvard, that Willie Dwayne Francois was in the 2% of the people who he taught. And I said, go away from here. You know what I'm saying? I have never seen a reference like that, okay? I mean, he talking about 98% of these people now, the top, not 10, the top 2 of the people he taught in decades. So I don't know what them people were doing. You may need to revisit that and see why you were not the valedictorian. Okay.
Well, I also, Doc, that's a gracious thing. We're closing. We're getting ready to pray. That's a gracious thing for you to acknowledge here. But I wish he had said I was in the top 1%, though. I wish he had said.
What, Doc, come on. You talking thousands of people this man taught at Harvard over all them years, and you smarter than 98% of them. Okay.
Listen, I hope you all will be on the lookout for an email from us. We'll send an email to everyone. If you have not had a chance to sign on to our call to action, we are sending letters to all, not all, we're sending letters to the top supporters. When we say supporters, we're talking about the people who keep the coffers of he kept the coffers of his campaign filled. We're sending letters to Governor Murphy's supporters, letting them know that since he refuses to meet with us and listen to us and our coalition and so many coalitions across the state, maybe he'll listen to them. And so we want you to sign on to that letter. I'll make sure you have the link to that letter in the email that will go out as a thank you and as an acknowledgement for joining our experience today. And so remember, we are putting optimal pressure on our governor, who cannot take for granted Black votes, who cannot hide behind a tenure on the national board of the NAACP, and he cannot hide behind his virtue signaling and his racial demagoguery. We need him not to just be woke with rhetoric. We need him to actually govern as a civil rights leader that he wants us to believe that he is. And so your name on that letter and the institutions that you represent on that letter will ensure that that the governor's supporters know that we mean business, and that they know that the governor is abdicating his moral responsibility to uphold the New Jersey State Constitution, which is very clear that segregation in our schools by any means is illegal, unconstitutional, unconstitutional and cannot happen. And so be on the lookout for that call to action. We'll be right back here next week. Bring somebody in with you. We'll be right back here next week. We have another speaker who's going to be phenomenal as we think about this work of movement building and protecting democracy as people of faith. And then on the last Wednesday of this month, we have 3 scholars that you don't want to miss. 3 academics, 3 experts who are voices and offer a vision to what an integrated, opportunity, abundant America can actually be. So thank you all for being here. And now I leave you with the benediction. Now unto you, O God, who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think, according to the power at work in us. To you, God, be glory, majesty, dominion, power today and forevermore. And everybody everywhere said amen. Amen. Go in peace, go in love, go in abolition, go in freedom, and let's make this movement stronger from the ground up. Peace.
Praise God. All right.